Welcome to another episode of Aliyah Money Talks. I discussed previously in a recent episode about how we can all learn so much from each other, and I want to start putting out more of these episodes where we can learn from different experts, from all kinds of different Olim who have had lots of different experiences since making Aliyah. So please subscribe, YouTube, check out, you can subscribe on the website, and you will get all the latest content. With that, I'm very excited to introduce Aaron Katzman. Aaron Katzman is the author of the book, Retirement GPS, How to Navigate Your Way to a Secure Financial Future. He is a licensed financial professional both in Israel and the U.S., and the CEO of Lighthouse Capital, a boutique wealth management firm in Yerushalayim. Aaron, start us off. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of what you do.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me on. It's an honor. I'm a financial advisor. I'm licensed both in Israel and in the U.S. I'm a branch of an American brokerage firm. The name of the firm is Portfolio Resources Group, and we work with clients to really understand what their goals are, what their needs are, and then we sort of a goals-based practice, and then we invest accordingly so people can achieve whatever it is that they're setting out to accomplish.
Perfect. So you're really an expert on retirement and retirement planning, and that's kind of what we wanted to focus on today. I think there's a lot of Olim that are coming to retire here. There's a lot of Olim that are already in Israel planning for retirement, or Olim in America that are thinking about the concept of retirement. So if we just jump right into the nitty and gritty, how do I know if I'm saving enough for retirement? How do I, what are different ways I can look at that?
Well, I think that there are different stages in life, and at different stages we can start computing things a little bit differently. The first rule I would say is that you've got to save for retirement. Okay, you don't want to just wake up when you're 60 and say, "Uh-oh," right? Like, now what do I do? So there's some basic rules that I would suggest, and that's to try and invest anywhere between 10 and 20% of your income. Get it invested. It can be in retirement funds. It can be in sort of taxable funds, but get that money invested. And if we're talking about Israel specific, a lot of employees are pretty much there already, right? The amount of money that they've got from the social benefits going into pension, going into what's called a Keren Hishtalmut, a provident fund, gets you between 10 and 15%, generally. So if you can add a little bit more the merrier, obviously. But that's the first bit of advice that I would tell people. Once you get maybe into your 50s, what I would say to determine if you are on the right track or if you've already saved enough is to take a look at what your expenses are currently, right? What are you spending currently? I don't believe that once you hit retirement, your expenses are going to drop by 25%. That's sort of like taken as gospel in the financial planning world, especially in the United States, but I don't believe that that's true. I think there are all kinds of other expenses that hit when you're here. It could be helping out kids, taking families away on vacations, all kinds of different things which come up, which they don't necessarily account for in the U.S., and is very specific to being in Israel. So I think you have to look at your expenses and see right now where you are vis-a-vis those expenses. Do you have enough money saved that at a certain percentage return, let's say 3 or 4%, that'd be enough to cover your expenses? And you obviously have to add in, well, down the road when I retire, I'm going to be getting my pension. I'm going to be getting some passive income from my pension. I'm going to be getting Bituach Leumi. I might be getting Social Security or some other countries' social safety net payment. So you want to take what you've got saved plus any kind of pension or other passive income which you think are going to be coming in, and then you can sort of see, okay, I'm spending X and I've got Y sort of on a monthly basis. I'm a little short, I'm good, whatever it is, and that'll give you a good insight into where you're holding vis-a-vis what you're going to need in retirement.
So let's say you're getting close to retirement, and you're watching this video, and you kind of start to feel like, I don't have enough, I'm not there. What are kind of some steps you can do to catch up quickly?
Step number one is save like crazy, go crazy saving, right? But you might not have a choice, right? You might have to really cut back on your lifestyle in order to get that savings number as high as you possibly can get it. That's number one. Number two is people don't want to necessarily hear it, but you may want to delay retirement. Every year that you sort of delay retirement on the back end, right, when you get into your 70s, 80s, and 90s, it'll add maybe 2 to 3 years to the amount of money that you'll have to fund your retirement, just because of the way that compound interest works. You might want to pick up some side jobs. You're going to have to, if you're, hitting 60 and you really don't have much saved, you're going to have to go all in, right? You're going to really have to sacrifice in order to get to that level, because, whatever you're going to get from your Bituach Leumi or whatever is not going to be enough money to be able to sustain yourself on. So you're really going to have to do it yourself. And again, that could mean take on a side job. It could be saving a lot more and consuming a lot less. That's generally the way to do it. So can you kind of explain, I guess, the advantages, the value of having a financial roadmap, what it is, what kind of peace of mind a financial plan can bring to the table in terms of planning for retirement? So, like any kind of a roadmap, right? It can help you get from point A to point B, as opposed to sort of winging it. Now, I think that maybe too much emphasis is put on, let's say, a financial plan. And, living in Israel, we know that we never know what tomorrow holds for us, let alone what's going to be in 20 years from now. So I think you have to take financial plans with a grain of salt, but they're incredibly important, right? It might sound like I'm contradicting myself a little bit, but I don't put all my faith into the financial plan, but you definitely need to have, like you called it, a roadmap to get from point A, which is today, to point B, which is retirement. And it just helps, right? It helps organize. It's like a tool that helps you organize how to do it, right? What do I need to do? How much do I have to save? It's sort of what percentage return. When I put in all the factors with how much money I'm saving, how much money I already have, at what percentage return, it'll help me understand how much I'm going to have at that future date. It'll also give me insights in how much I'm able to spend, how much I might have to cut from my spending in order to increase my investing. So like any roadmap, it's a really, really useful tool to sort of keep you on the straight and narrow, right? It gives you a good plan, for lack of a better word, to get to where it is you want to be.
So when you get to retirement and you've got all these different buckets, you've got, in Israel, you might have Bituach Leumi, you could have Social Security coming from the U.S. You could have your Israeli pension, your private pension from your employer that's paying out an annuity or different things. Different ways to work that. You can have IRAs in the U.S. and Keren Ishtalmut and all kinds of different taxable brokerage accounts, like we were talking about, different investments. How do you kind of know which bucket you should be taking from first? How to organize that?
That's a great question that people don't tend to ask. I think there are a few rules that you want to first put in place. And my ultimate answer is you have to do it in real time. Okay, I wouldn't say when I'm 65 that when I'm 87, I'm going to take money out of X, Y, and Z. Sort of the overriding concept is whatever's in sort of a tax deferred or not taxable plan should probably, okay, stay invested the longest because it's got the most benefits by not having to pay any tax. That being said, okay, the reason I say you have to do it in real time is things change, markets change, right? It might be that it's beneficial to take money out of a taxable account first. It might be beneficial to leave money in a taxable account because you have such a large capital gain that you've accumulated over 30 or 40 years of investing that's going to cost you more than actually pulling money out of a tax deferred retirement fund where your taxes income. Taxes play a big part of this. And that's why you have to sort of do it in real time and probably do it in conjunction with your accountant. Because if you make a mistake, it can be pretty costly. It can cost thousands, if not more, shekels or dollars if you do things incorrectly. So I think it's really, really important to, again, tax deferred savings generally we want to let run, but there are times where we don't want it, where we need to take money from that. And keep in mind, there are certain things which are going to kick in no matter what, right? Like if you're in the U.S. and you've got retirement accounts, you're going to have to start, you're required to start taking distributions by the time you're 72. And if you don't do that, you're going to get fined, right? So you're going to have to take out some money from certain plans no matter what you do. That's the way that I would probably do it.
So when I'm nearing retirement, somebody nearing retirement versus somebody who has 30, 40, years until retirement, somebody starting off their career may want to invest one way versus somebody who's nearing retirement. Talk about some of the considerations around investing for somebody getting close to withdrawing on those investments to pay for their cost of living.
So generally in the business, when it comes to investing, time is your friend. If you've got a lot of it. If you don't have so much time can be your enemy. How does that sort of transition into your question? So when you're young, like we're going through now, the market drops significantly. You don't really care. You keep investing. Over the long term, things tend to work out in this business. But if you're approaching retirement and you're not going to have any other income, and let's say you're not going to have any more potential inheritances coming in, right? Whatever you've managed to save and accumulate, it is what it is. That's what you have, right? You may not, depending how much you have and how much you need, but there's a good chance, if we're speaking about sort of average people, that they have to take their foot off the accelerator a little bit, right? They won't be able to afford, the market's dropping by 30% or 35% and having that be a prolonged drop, right? If it's 35% and the market jumps right back up, that's one thing, but we don't know the future, right? So we have to sort of plan for the worst case scenario. And as such, since you have no real way to increase your income because you're retiring, there's no big sums of money that are coming your way. Like I said, what you have is what you have. And that may very well entail you taking your foot off the accelerator and diversifying your portfolio, reallocating your portfolio in a way which is more conservative than it currently is when you're sort of in the accumulation phase when you're younger. Right? When you're younger, you can pretty much go all in and be linked one way or another to the stock market because, like I said, you can sort of ride out the roller coaster and things should be fine. When you get close to retirement or you're already in retirement, you don't have that luxury of time. Time becomes your enemy, so to speak. And as such, you should probably reallocate and get your portfolio into a more conservative, not uber conservative, more conservative than it was when you're in the accumulation phase. That might mean moving money into what we call fixed income, which can be bonds, which can be government insured deposits, all sorts of things out there which pay a fixed rate of return every year and help balance out your portfolio as well.
So for somebody specifically retiring in Israel, there's, especially us Americans that tend to have savings and investing outside of Israel, there's a lot of concern and fear around exchange rates. And, you look at the graph of the exchange rate over the last 20 years, there's obviously a lot of concern. How does a retiree relate to that? How do they plan for the fluctuations in currency exchange and kind of how do you correlate that? How do you keep that, bring that into your investing in your financial roadmap?
So I'll tell you a story. This goes back probably 10 to 12 years. But there was a couple here, and they retired with $1 million in the U.S., and they did all their calculations. And what ended up happening was the shekel appreciated, right, by about 20% against the dollar, which basically meant that their $1 million was now worth $800,000 in dollar terms, right? They lost 20% of the value of their money. The purchasing power of their money now decreased because they were all dollar based. And you know what ended up happening? They moved back. So they couldn't make ends meet. If all your money is in a foreign country, then like you're a retiree and then you move to Israel, it's tricky. What I would then probably tell people to do is, start bringing money to Israel. That's the best way to hedge the currency is to actually own the currency you're living in. Sometimes that's just not doable for tax reasons or whatever. It's going to be more costly for you to actually bring your money to Israel than to leave it there and suffer the ups and downs of the currency market. People who are living in Israel and still have money abroad but get paid in Israel, have retirement plans in Israel, they're sort of already de facto hedging themselves because they're, a good chunk of their funds, one way or another, are shekel denominated already. So that goes a long way into hedging. It's hard, it's going to be very difficult to have 100% protection against currency valuations or devaluations. But I think that if you sort of over time migrate your funds or a significant amount of funds, it doesn't have to be everything, but enough to cover a year, 2 years of living expenses, you migrate that money and bring it over to Israel and just get it into shekels. You don't try and time the currency market because you don't want to turn into a currency speculator. Ultimately, things tend to work.
Essentially, a retiree may want to, consider maybe, more expanded retirement emergency savings, as opposed to, a young investor or somebody who's earning income in Israel, somebody who's got all their money, they're retiring later, much later in life for retirement. They want to bring over a chunk of emergency savings in shekels. That's kind of, is that a good summary as far as what you would?
That's what I would say. That I think that's spot on, knowing, right, that money isn't going to turn into $1 million, right? It really is emergency savings, but you're being overly cautious, right? Instead of keeping 3 to 6 months of emergency savings, you're bringing a year, 2 years of savings over as a hedge, because there's not going to be a lot that you can do with it, right? As we know, it's very difficult for Americans to save outside of the United States. So, keep in mind that money is not going to earn very much for you, but that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it as a hedge against the currency, so you can sort of smooth out the ride.
And can sleep at night.
It's an important thing to
right.
Yeah, so you can sleep at night. Exactly. That's how you do it. Exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about the complexities of managing, a safe withdrawal rate when you look at what you've saved up until retirement? You're now retiring. You're ready to start, withdrawing on these hard-earned investments and hard-earned savings. How do you deal with the complexities of coming out? What's an appropriate amount to take out every year?
Right. So the first thing is, again, you have to figure out, number one, sort of how much you think you're going to be spending. What are your expenses? That's the first thing you have to do. Okay, so let's say I'm spending X. I know that I've got pensions. I know that I've got, government social benefits that are coming in, Bituach Leumi, Social Security, whatever it is. Then I'm going to look, if I'm short, so I've got to start looking at my investments to supplement my retirement income. I think that you can be comfortable. Again, it's a function of how much you have and whatever, but let's just speak sort of for the average person. The rate that's usually thrown out there is you can sort of comfortably withdraw, let's say 4%, 3.5% to 4% of your funds on an annual basis. Why can you do that? Because the theory goes, if I take out 4%, I should be able to, over time, at the very least, replace the money that I'm taking out, plus increase, plus leave a little bit of room for my portfolio to grow, to offset inflation and all the other things that are out there, so that I can at least keep the value of my money constant, right? I'm not looking, it'd be great if I could have the best of both worlds, which is take out whatever I need and grow my portfolio exponentially. But that doesn't always work, right? So we want to be able to replace what we're taking out and keep, at the very least, keep the purchasing power of our money stable. That's where we get to that sort of 3.5% to 4% withdrawal rate. Knowing that it's not going to be, I think a lot of planners miss this, and that it's not necessarily a constant, right? Generally, your expenses once you retire, let's say if you're retiring at 65 or 67, I would say those sort of the first 10 to 12 years are going to be much more expensive, because in today's day and age where we're living older, people are going to be a lot more active during those first, let's say, 10 years of retirement. They're going to probably travel, or they're going to do any kind of leisure activity, costs money, right? I have this sort of equation. This is the only math you're going to get, okay? So bear with me. But the only math you're going to get is sort of leisure equals money spent, right? There's a big advantage when you work, and that's that outside from buying a shirt every now and then and maybe going out for lunch, you don't spend money for 8 to 10 hours a day because you're in the office, okay? You're in retirement. You might want to go out, brunch with your spouse. You might want to take a weekend somewhere. Things start adding, hobbies, whatever it is. All these things cost money. So, and the more active you are, sort of the younger you are, you're going to want to take advantage of the fact that you still are able to travel. You're still able to do whatever it is you want to do. That's going to cost a little bit more money. So bear in mind that, like I said, the first 10 years of retirement are going to be more expensive. And I realize there's healthcare and all these things as you age. It's not going to be the same, right? Most people have insurance one way or another. That first decade of retirement, from my experience sitting with hundreds and hundreds of retirees, tend to be the most expensive.
Let's drill on that a little bit, because I think a lot of people making out there from the U.S., there's a lot of planning in the U.S. around catastrophic medical expenses, where later in your life, after, there's a real fear that the expenses are going to be extreme, and that needs to be accounted for in your plan. I guess, how is that different in Israel? How would you relate to that here?
It's expensive. It can be expensive, but most people through their healthcare operator get insurance, which covers part of the cost. I recommend to clients to go out and get insurance, private insurance, although there's been a change in that recently, but to get private insurance. So the people, there are obviously different levels of care based on your financial situation, right? There are plenty of people who are going to go to sort of higher end assisted living facilities where they, which costs a pretty penny, but sometimes they'll sell their home in order to fund it or whatever. And they get the nursing facility. They also get their own apartment, and there's all kinds of entertainment. There's all kinds of stuff going on. People choose to retire there even at a young age. And everything's there for them, right? It's costly, but again, they might choose to pay for it either with some savings, or they sell their home and they pay with it that way. People who don't have quite as much money, might have to rely more on the government, might not, they're not going to get into a fancy facility, or they might choose to stay at home with nursing care or whatever. I don't know any statistics. I can't tell you about that, but from what I've seen, my unofficial drilling down is that it works one way or another. It's easier for people, I think, to live out their lives here until 120 than it is in the U.S. It's not the same costs involved, and again, there's insurances, the kupot kick in, the government kicks in. When the person becomes incapacitated or has cognitive decline, the government will come in. Bituach Leumi comes in, and they'll give a certain amount for a foreign worker, hours or 24/7 once they get to a certain level. So we might pay for it over the years through higher taxes, but at the end of the day, there are very, very good solutions for people to live out their years here. And like I say, I think it's a lot cheaper than it is in the States.
I think you're back. Okay, great. So I just lost you there for a second, but I guess I'd want to conclude kind of with an overarching question. As far as we've talked a lot about the different complexities of retirement planning and mentioned yourself. I know on your podcast you've gone into other goals and we've discussed this in the past about around retirement, about giving, around preparing for inheritance, about all these different competing goals in many senses. How would you break it down between somebody who wants to manage this entire retirement on their own, with the help of a family, etc., or somebody who wants to take advantage of an advisor and get help with this? How would you break that down?
So I'm not opposed for people doing things their own by themselves, but they have to know the issues out there. You can read up on it, But at some point you are gonna bring in professionals, right? You're not gonna write your own. You're gonna use a lawyer. Chances are you're gonna use a lawyer for a will. You want to structure things correctly. There are a lot of things even do-it-yourself investors don't know about, and it's really important. It might be sad, but it's really important that as we age, our abilities to make rational decisions and be in control of all these other issues outside of should I own Microsoft or not? That's like not a big issue, right? Becomes impaired. And I really believe that you should use professionals to guide you through the process. You might want to do it on a consulting basis, right? You don't necessarily have to turn everything over to them, but they bring in a level of experience that you're just not going to have because they've just seen so much more, right? You've seen, I've seen so many various sort of, I would say, estate plans. And when you throw the word out estate plan, you might think that's for people, high net worth individuals, but it's not, right? It could be, there's a tension, I would say, when people retire, especially in Israel, where they want to, on the one hand, help out their kids and their grandkids while they're still alive, as opposed to taking care of themselves and making sure they have enough money to live out their lives and then give the money posthumously. Right? That's a tension that I see all the time. I would say in Israel, helping people as much as possible, helping out the kids and the grandkids while the parents are alive generally takes precedence. But you have to know how to do it and how to structure things correctly. And we haven't even gotten to the giving, right? The giving is a whole other plan, and that's going to be really difficult for you to do on your own. You really need to work in conjunction with a lawyer and an accountant to structure things correctly. There are also like these little nuances that exist in Israel, which might not exist in other places, that you need to take care of. And if you're not aware of it, you can really get stuck. Two issues which I would highlight are, one is called the bank, right? When you have a joint account at a bank, if you don't sign a certain declaration, which is called arichut yamim, right? End of days or length of days, whatever the translation is. What the default is, believe it or not, if you pass away, that your surviving spouse splits the money with the children. Right? That sounds bizarre to a lot of people, right? You would think, well, all my money goes to my spouse. Unless you codify that in a will, which supersedes everything else, you're going to be 50-50 partners with your children. Now, you might say, well, my children are going to be great and they'll take care of me. Okay? Children are great, but I can tell you personally that when money enters the picture, people's personalities change drastically. Okay? You don't want to rely on that. I've said this, I've written about this. I told somebody I was sitting with yesterday about this very issue, that I know somebody who this happened to. And she had very little funds left. And what ended up happening is she had to split with her children. And at the end of the day, they ended up forcing her out of an apartment. Wow. She had nowhere to live. She was living in their home for 30 years or whatever, that 40 years. And the kids basically made her vacant and rent somewhere else. It was so disturbing, but that can happen, right? So you really need to write a will to prevent this. The other thing with a will is that it allows you to be in control of your situation. You dictate what's going to be the situation when you pass away. Who's going to get the money? Are you going to split things equally? Or do you want to give, this is where the philanthropy comes in as well, how much you want to give. Going back to your question, when you work with professionals, they can help guide you through this. And a lot of times, individuals just don't know that kind of thing exists. The other issue is when it comes to healthcare. And that's, there's now what's called a durable power of attorney in Israel. Bizarrely enough, right? Throughout the world, generally, a power of attorney sort of kicks in when the person becomes incompetent, doesn't have the ability to make sound decisions. For some, and then you before that stage, you appoint an agent who is your power of attorney who makes all kinds of financial health decisions for you. In Israel, for some reason, when you get to that point, the power of attorney ceases to work. Okay, right when you need it to work, it no longer works. Now, what they've come up with over the last couple of years is called the durable power of attorney, and that lets the power of attorney then, when the person becomes incompetent and can no longer make decisions, they can then make healthcare decisions for them, financial decisions for them. So that's something that's really, really, really important as well for people to take care of. And again, a lot of people who do things on their own just don't know about these things, and at the end of the day, they're sort of stuck. And that's why you should really sort of turn to professionals again, maybe on a consultancy basis, whatever it is, but at least get their input because they've got so much experience with these issues.
Great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been extremely useful. Where can people find out more about you and follow your work?
So they can check me out on the web at www.aaronkatzman.com. They can email me at Aaron, Aaron, at lighthousecapital.co.il. And they can also go to YouTube. Like you mentioned, I've got a YouTube channel. Subscribe. You can get all my videos, all my content there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming, and have a great day.
Thanks for having me.